welcome to the Johnversations Podcast. This is number 38, and as always, I am your host, John Connor, and I am so excited about this week's episode. My guest today is an award-winning film director known for her work in the horror genre. You may know her from projects like Vanilla Cake, Crypt TV's Fractured Fable, Cheshire, 4950, and she's also the creator and host of a brand new, very scary, very unsettling. I enjoy it a lot. A brand new podcast. It's called Skeltons In My Closet. Ladies and gentlemen, listen on the internet, in your car, watch it on YouTube. If you got your earbuds in, please make a scene wherever you are and give a warm welcome to the amazing Miss Crystal Pastis. Crystal, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it, and I'm super excited to have the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Oh, it's my pleasure. We were talking a little bit before the show, but I became aware of your work through a friend of the show, Jessica Gomez. She was on last week, and I watched one of your shorts. I listened to the podcast first, and then I went and watched the short, and I was just like blown away at how good both of them were. And so when you said, "Hey, I'd love to come on," I was just genuinely excited. So I'm very, very happy to have you. And before we kind of jump in, I did want to ask, you work in the horror genre, things like that. Right now, we're kind of going through like a real life horror situation with COVID and the pandemic and everything like that. So I wanted to ask, like, how have you been holding up? Are you doing okay? I know it's a crazy time, so just wanted to check in and see how you're doing.
Yeah, it is a crazy time. And I feel like, it's we're all experiencing this, but everyone's dealing with it in different ways. At the beginning, it was pretty surreal. When this all started, I thought by May, it's like, oh, this is just a few months thing. I'm sure like we all did, but now that some time has gone by, it's been so crazy. I think I'm holding up okay. There are like dips where I'm like, I can't believe this is happening and having some sort of existential crisis. But for the most part, I think I'm holding it together. I'm fortunate I haven't been affected too much by this personally in any kind of way, but you can't help but start thinking about your life in a different way. Everything's changed so much. So, but on a whole, I'd say I'm doing all right.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you where I feel like this has really shifted a lot of people's view on like their own mortality, like people making wills and like that was a big thing for me. My therapist was like, why don't you start recording videos to like speak to your daughter so that like that way if anything did happen to you, you have the peace of mind of like knowing that she could hear what you were like from you. Which was like, not my thought process that I was planning to have in 2020. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's I know it's crazy. I'm glad that you've been holding up okay though. Has it been weird for you? Because, you seem like somebody who, puts a lot of energy and time into their work and things like that. So has it been weird for you, like kind of having a little bit of a closed off schedule compared to normal?
Well, it's been all right. I live in Los Angeles, so it's been, I've gotten a lot more free time, which I wasn't expecting to have. And that's been good. That's also kind of where the podcast was born from. And it's incredible, the shifting of schedules, how much time I realized I spent doing so many things, obviously, like sitting in traffic, planning out your time around work and seeing people. And suddenly you have this open-ended schedule and finding ways to fill that time. For me, I have a very hard time just sitting down and, letting my mind just go idle kind of. And I need to be doing something a lot of the time. So that's been great. I've been able to take up some hobbies earlier on in the quarantine, but truthfully, that's where the whole podcast was born from, was like, I have all this time. What am I going to do with it?
Oh yeah. It's definitely been helpful for me as well. Cause it's like, we're an interview based show. So it's like getting to kind of connect with the outside world a little bit, being like, well, I can't see people in person for the most part, but I can like sit down and have so I know I grew up playing music. I was in bands and toured and all that stuff. So just having some kind of creative outlet to be like, let me pour this into has been really helpful. I think a lot of people out there have maybe people who haven't had those creative tendencies before have been like, well, I got to find something. So I mean, maybe that's the good thing, is like, it's been a open door for people to kind of explore and see what tickles them creatively, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely. And maybe 6 months ago or so, I was walking around the neighborhood I live in, and I saw a girl and her daughter sitting on their front lawn. And of course, this is something you wouldn't see normally. And he was teaching her how to play guitar. And so I think, like, in all of this terribleness that's happening, I do hope and I do think that some good will come out of this in some way. If it's somebody learning a new hobby, or people getting to spend time with their families in a way that they never have before. I do hope that some good will come out of all of this.
Yeah. And it's been cool, 'cause like I have a 2-year-old. And so it's been really cool to be able to spend more time with her, you know what I mean? Kind of like watch her little personality grow and stuff like that, which, if everything was operating business as usual, I don't know if I would look at it the same way, or like kind of take in those moments in the same lens as I've been able to do. So I think you're right. I think that's like, hopefully that's the silver lining, is that, people strengthen connections and pick up a hobby. I know my daughter, anytime I play guitar, she comes and she's guitar and slaps the strings, and it's like, yeah, go for it.
That's
like,
so great.
Yeah, like
so
figure
great.
it out. So,
yeah.
I did want to ask you this, speaking of like kids and stuff like that. Again, you work in the horror genre. And I was just curious, when was it that you found, because for me, I was a kid. My dad let me watch Nightmare on Elm Street when I was little. And it was always that taboo of like, I don't think I should be watching this, but I'm going to watch it anyway. So was it similar for you, or when did you kind of find your love for it?
I would say pretty early on. I don't think I knew what it was when I realized I liked horror. I have a short film where I kind of discuss this a little bit, but I remember very early on when I saw my dad watching The Exorcist at night. And I remember I wasn't allowed to watch it. It was too much. It was too adult. At the time, I was probably around 7 or so. And I just was so fascinated, was like, what was this thing that was so scary? Even my dad I remember talking about it in a way that scared him. And there was just this fascination about it. I think it was a combination of, I'm not allowed to see it. So like, what is it? Why can't I watch it? But also, what is this? What's so scary about it? What will I be scared? There were so many questions around it. And, then as I got older and I was just so drawn to it. I loved that. I just loved movies that put me on edge. And I was so curious as to how I would be feeling during it. And it was almost like a test to myself during some of these movies. Like, I'm bigger, I'm better than this. I can get through this movie, and like, and so then it just, I knew I always wanted to work in film. And then I was like, oh, these two things, these can go together. Like, I can make the thing I love watching. And so that's really where it was born, was just like knowing it was that thing of like, why can I conquer this almost? Can I get past my own fears or everyone else's fears? Like, can I understand this thing that seems so scary? And that's really where it started, I think.
Yeah, I'm very similar. I was the kid who, because it's almost like, you're right, like you're testing your own psyche to be like,
right.
Like, I think of it as like almost like a water torture to yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, especially at that age, you're like, how much can I subject myself to and
right.
still like be able to fall asleep tonight?
Yeah.
But I was that kid. Like, if you told me I couldn't watch something, and it was never like this for like drugs or alcohol. Like, if you told me I couldn't do something normally, I was like, all right, well, that sucks, but I won't do it. But with like movies, TV shows, I remember my dad was like, you're not allowed to see Clerks. There's that, I guess it was that scene, because I was like 11. So it was that scene in the bathroom where she goes in, she hooks up with that guy who's passed away, and she doesn't realize it. But like, that was the reason I wasn't able to see it. So as soon as he said that, we had a video store at the corner. So I was like, well, let me go up and see if this guy will let me rent it. And I remember I got a beating for watching. That was back in the day when you got beatings for doing stuff.
Sure.
But it was just like something, I don't know. It was something almost, I don't want to use the word seductive because I think it sounds creepy coming from like a 35-year-old man. You're like, oh, it was so seductive. But
I get it though. It's like that thing that draws you in. It's enticing.
Was there anything for you? Because I know you said like, it was almost like a test. Is there anything? Because I know for me, there's one that stands out. But like, did you ever explore something where you were like, oh, okay, I can't finish this?
That's a good question. I mean, I still have a hard time getting through The Exorcist. And I love all kinds of horror, but the one that I remember, and I haven't watched it since, so I'm too scared to almost. Like, I remember that I saw The Exorcism of Emily Rose when it came out, and I was young at the time, and I don't know if I was so terrified because I was young, but I got through it. I watched it, but I remember after that, I was like, I can't go back there. There's the scene that stands out to me so much. I think she's eating spiders in the corner of this room that she's in. And I'd never seen anything like that before. And I was like, oh my God, it was so scary. So, as a test to myself, I should try and rewatch that, but that's one that really stands out to me. And I saw this one recently that was on like Netflix's top 10 movies that no one can finish, which was this movie called Veronica, which I was able to get through and I thought it was okay, but I remember being pretty spooked in certain parts of that.
Yeah, for me, and I love I love possession movies. Like I really liked I think it came around the same time. It was The Last Exorcism. Where he's like, my favorite part is that preacher who's like, watch me, I can slip my mom's banana bread recipe into my sermon. And Jesus said, you take 2 eggs, you put them in a bowl and you beat them. I like that character so much in that film. But for me, the movie was The Last House on the Left, the original. Because I must have been like 16 and I love movies, so I got a job at Blockbuster. And for kids who are listening, Blockbuster was this place that you could go to and they would rent movies. You had to bring them back. They don't have them anymore. You got Netflix, but Google it. But I remember my dad telling me, he was like, I went and saw this movie in the theater and I walked out in like the first 15 minutes. I couldn't finish it. And I was like, well, shit, I gotta see this movie. And I had made it through the first like 15, 20 minutes. I was like, I can't do it. Like it's something that's praised about that movie now is that violence is so realistic on such a like small budget. But I don't know if like maybe it was just the age I was at, but I was just like, I can't do this. It hit me too hard. But I love like The Exorcist. I love my wife is not a horror fan, so these are things that's like everybody goes to bed and then I get to stay up late and watch what I want to watch. But,
yes.
But yeah, it's just those are some of my favorites. Are like let me ask you: Are you drawn? Is there a particular? Because I was talking about this with Jessica, but horror seems to kind of be like a tree, where it's like this is the horror genre, but then off of the tree there are different branches, and you've got like your demonic possession horror or your slasher horror or your Saws and Hostel and all that. Is there any particular like subgenre that you find yourself attracted to more than another?
Well, I love like psychological horror where you don't know what's happening, if the person's really sane, if they're insane, where you can feel yourself almost spinning out with the characters. And that's I love the Twilight Zone and the original. And it's people could consider it like old timey now, but there's some real horror in those things, because when you don't know, if you can't put your faith in the main character who you're supposed to like be going along this journey with, I think that's some of the the scariest stuff, like slashers I love. But I love to watch them because to me, they're so much fun, like Friday the 13th or Halloween, like those types of movies, they're just like a blast to me. I watch those for a good time, but the ones that really kind of like get under my skin are the psychological ones, like Hereditary really got me. I just recently watched this movie called The Platform. Have you seen that?
No.
It's nuts. And that one, that's on Netflix as well. And that's crazy because as you're watching it, you don't know, you're just like, you're understanding the plot and you're going through everything as the main character is going through it. You're understanding his situation as he's finding out everything for himself. And you don't know if he's going crazy, if everyone else in the world is going crazy and he's the sane one. So those are the ones that I just, I find myself really, I can get lost in those kinds of movies.
Yeah. And I agree. I think it's when there's almost, because you're right, slasher films, especially. Yeah. I think Halloween kind of stands out on its own because you have a certain investment in Jamie Lee Curtis. And it was, other than Psycho is really like the first, like quote unquote, like slasher film. But then you move into the 80s and it's just like, how many kids can we just kill? Like,
right.
have them do terrible things. We kill them. The audience cheers, where there's no like emotional investment, where when you get those films that really kind of like bite into you, or like you said, get under your skin, it makes it that much more fun and you become invested in the outcome. Like I think one for me, I don't know if I think it might be called Hush, if I'm remembering correctly.
Oh yeah.
The deaf woman.
Yeah.
That one, because I was like, all right, this is definitely like a slasher film, but I've never seen it done this way. And there's so much like she can't hear the phone ring, or like the lights are flashing. I don't know. It was just like, it was one of those ones that I was unsettled by the time I got like halfway into it. And I was like, whew, like that, like just kind of chills you a little bit. You know what I mean?
Oh, totally. That one was great because that exactly what you said. Like they did a slasher movie in a way I've never seen it done before. It's already spooky. I think they're kind of like out in the middle of nowhere, but then you add that layer of, okay, well, if you have one of your senses taken away, what does that do for you? It's also why I love the movie Bird Box so much. That one really, I love that because just the idea of not being able to see and your sight, if that was the thing that, like, that's the way you take everything in. And that's the way that, for the most part, you can protect yourself in horror movies, right? You can see something coming before it gets you, or you can hide because the killer's over there. But when you don't have that sense, it's like, it makes you that much more vulnerable.
Yeah, and I think it's the same thing with something like A Quiet Place, where it's like
exactly.
You take, normally in a horror film, you see something coming after someone, and your initial response is to like, yeah. Even as we went and saw Halloween the 2018, my wife was like 2 weeks away from giving birth to our baby, and I was like, please go see this with me. So we went, and even people in the theater were like, don't go in there, yelling, what I mean? And so it's wow. That communication is such a big part. And then you have a movie like The Quiet Place where it's like, cut it out. Like you can't warn anybody. You can't like, I don't know. It's weird when you take away a sense that, especially watching the movie, you're like, oh, well, I would 100% rely on this if I was in that situation.
Right. Exactly.
Well, I did want to ask you this, because I know that you said like you had wanted to work in the film industry and things like that. And that horror seemed like the natural progression for you. But when was it that you realized like, hey, I want to make movies, or I want to be in this industry?
Very early on. I knew when I was a kid, I wanted to work in the film industry. I fell so much in love with film. And like, that was the only thing I really thought about for a long time. Like that was, well, how do I get to do that? How do I, like, people are making this, I'm watching it on the screen. Somebody has to be making these things. So Very early on, I knew I wanted to work in film, and then I just kind of put all my efforts in that direction. I went to film school, and then shortly after film school, I moved to Los Angeles.
That's awesome. Where, if you don't mind me asking, where'd you go to film school?
I went to Emerson. It's this film school in Boston.
Okay.
And
cool.
That was very cool. They, the thing that attracted me so much to that school was they allowed us to work on like real film cameras, which I was so fascinated by. I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. We can actually film on real, like 16 millimeter film. And now it's funny looking back, because at the time, when I got out of college and I started working, I was talking so much about filming things and how this was like the art of filmmaking. And now I understand why everyone does it digitally, obviously for budget reasons. But I was like so naive and like so bright-eyed when I came out of there, because I was like, oh, this is the true art. This is how like the legends did it back in the day. But yeah, it was great. It was a great experience. I loved going there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's we grew up making little like horror films and like war movies and stuff like that. And we always had like the digital handy cam. And back then it was just like, okay, this is the scene, stop. And it was like, oh, we went too far, let's rewind. And then, okay, go right from here. And you would go through, like, we do martial arts movies and it would just be like a snow shovel on a punching bag, just like to get the sound. You have to time it right. So, working with 16 millimeter, I mean, like you said, I mean, that's Psycho, that's Halloween, that's, that's, I kind of, the way I think about it now is kind of like, I feel like if somebody if somebody had been shooting everything in digital and then someone was like, here's a 16 millimeter camera, it's like finding like a dinosaur bone. You know what I mean? It's just like this like piece of like history. And it just looks so cool. Like, were you a fan of Sinister at all?
Oh yeah, I like Sinister.
Yeah, I'm like a huge Ethan Hawke fan. So, but
he's great.
Yeah, but all those. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, I was gonna say I find I like him more and more. I never thought much of him, but then he's just done some like great movies, and the more I get into him, the more I love him. He's great.
Yeah, and it's he's one of those guys too that like he's been acting since he's a little kid. So like if you go into his catalog, like he was in this movie called The Explorers that I used to watch when I was real little. It's about these kids who find a tilt-a-whirl and they make a spaceship out of it, and it actually works, and they're able to like it's River Phoenix is in it, and
wow, that's cool.
But in that was my favorite part of Sinister, though. We talked about the 16 millimeter when they would cut to all those like 16. That was like the scariest thing. It just that sepia and like the grainy like oh yeah. I get flashbacks of that lawnmower scene like all the time where it's just like, oh shit, that's so scary.
It's so true. And have you ever seen Session 9?
No. Is that with is it Kate Hudson?
No, I think are you thinking of Skeleton Key maybe?
Yes, I think that's the one I'm thinking of.
Session 9's it's really good. I was super into it maybe like 10 years ago. I watched it all the time and I was constantly recommending it to everyone I saw, but I haven't seen it in a while now. So I'm curious to see if I'm so diehard about it as I was then. But the cool thing about that movie is, speaking of like tapes and finding like film and things like that, this one does it similarly, but they find audio tapes. So they play these audio tapes and you're just watching this person listen to these like really crackly old audio tapes of, they're cleaning out an insane asylum. And so as they're cleaning it out, they find this box of old tapes from a woman. There are 9 sessions of these audio tapes of a woman who has multiple personalities. And so you're just listening to this woman change personalities. And it's the freakiest thing because it's almost scarier not seeing it. You're just watching this guy listen to it. So you're making it all up in your head. And it's really spooky because you're doing the same thing. Even though you're not seeing it, you're visualizing everything that this woman's saying as she's changing personalities. It's very scary.
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite things. And I know like Eli Roth has talked about it before, but it's like, how do you blend letting the audience kind of develop it in their own head versus like giving them just enough to kind of push them. Like you want to, because you're right. Like the human mind is going to create something much more scarier. And I would say even personal, because like, you know, if we're watching that movie together, I'll have a completely different vision in my head than like what you have. So it's scary, but it's on like a personal level where it's like, oh, this is only something that I can think of. And then how do you pair that with, okay, here's like a practical effect, or, you know,
right.
That was one of my, I talk about Halloween a lot because right next to Evil Dead, those are like my two, like I would live and die by those films. But, you know, the first Halloween, there's really not much gore in it. You know, it's all like you think about it yourself. So it's, I don't know. It's crazy to think that like, that's like something that's so scary about it is something that you're not even being shown. You know what I mean? It's like these movies are so successful. They're successful for letting your mind just work the way that it's supposed to, you know?
Yeah. The thing that I think is really scary about Halloween also is that is Michael Myers just stalking Jamie Lee Curtis's character. Like wherever she is, so is he, you know, it's like you can't get away from him. No matter how much you try to, he's always there. And that to me is so scary. It's like there's literally no escaping Michael Myers. He is truly the boogeyman, you know. He will be wherever you are. And I just love that. I love that.
Well, let me ask you this, because last week Jessica Gomez and I were talking about this, and I was wondering, you know, since you brought that up, I am of the, if I'm remembering the conversation correctly, I am of the camp where I'm with you, where I think it is scary that he is kind of this, there's no mission to him. He's just an agent of like chaos and death, right? She liked that the second one tied in that they were related. So that gave him, that's why he's going after her specifically.
Right, motivation.
Right. So is there a concept that you're more of a fan of? Because for me, I like it where it's just, oh, he's just, for some reason, he's fixated on this person. Like this is the person he saw, he fixated, he's going to go through everybody else to get to her, as opposed to like, this is my sister and I have to come kill my sister. I just.
Right. Well, for me, like the closure side is like, well, yeah, I need to know why he's doing that. But to me, it's much, much scarier because in the first one, because you don't know. It's truly like, it plays on these fears of like, it could happen to anyone because there isn't that motivation, you know? Maybe it's like, I don't have a brother that wants to kill me, or I haven't pissed off my neighbor and they want to kill me, you know, like those are things that I can rationalize, and it brings me back to my own life. And it's like, you know, for me, it's way scarier knowing that Michael Myers doesn't have a motivation. You know, he can just show up and kill you. I remember hearing like I think it was an interview once where John Carpenter was talking about Michael Myers' mask, and it was, you know, it's all white. And I remember hearing someone talk about that. It's white because it's a blank slate where you can project your own fears onto him. And to me, that's so scary. It's like, I don't need to know that he killed his sister, because for me, it's like, he's not just like a slasher character. He's like the monster that lives in your closet as a kid, or he's the spiders I'm terrified of seeing on the counter. They're everywhere and I can't kill them. Like, to me, he's the embodiment of all those things that you as an individual are scared of.
I don't know. Just for me, like you said, having that white face and, you know, knowing that he hasn't spoken in 22 years and like, he's like, he's just like this, you know, boogeyman I think is the perfect word for him. So it's, I don't know. It's one of those ones that when I watched it, and it has its flaws. Like you can see like the sound operators cables on the porch in the beginning. And like, you know, they do a lot of like just real cheap, simple effects. But like for all of that, I think there's a reason that it still holds up today. Like October 1st, I was like, Halloween, I got to watch. Like it's that time of year. So.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, yeah, I know you said you finished film school and then you moved to LA. I was wondering, and this is something I hadn't thought about before, but we had a we had a guest on, Jordana Lilly, who's an actress, and one of the things that she had said was, you know, everyone tells you like be prepared to audition for 80 things and get one, right? Like be prepared for that rejection and stuff like that. She said what they didn't prepare her for was like not getting auditions to be rejected for. You know what I mean?
Interesting. Yeah.
So like when you got to LA and you're looking, starting to look for work, like what was that like for you? Did you find work pretty quickly, or like did it take a while to get the foot in the door? Or?
Yeah, well, it was it happened for me pretty quickly because I think I just got into kind of a lucky situation. I was just looking for work. I wanted to stay out in LA. Emerson does this program where you can spend your last semester in Los Angeles and do an internship at the same time, which is like a huge reason why people end up going. Like I'm from the East Coast originally. So, to me, Los Angeles seems so far away. I didn't know anyone out there. I didn't know the neighborhoods. I didn't even know where to start. So, with Emerson, it worked out really well because they had this satellite program out here where you do your last semester, you intern for a semester for credit. And then it helps, if you enjoy Los Angeles, it helps your transition out there, which was great because I was able to kind of learn what the different neighborhoods were. And I was able to start applying for different jobs, like anything I could get while I was out there before that semester ran up. So I could, transition that out there easily. And I was just applying to wherever I could and sending out my resume. I was like, I'll do whatever. Like, I just need to do something to make some money. I was working at a frozen yogurt shop out there when I first moved. And I was like, I know I don't want to work here anymore. I want to just get something in the film industry. And I just was applying and I got this call. I was to work as an assistant on a documentary series. And I didn't know anything more than that. It was for archival on this documentary series. I was like, okay, that sounds fine. I'll do whatever. And I got there and I realized I got the job. And I realized once I was there, they didn't post about this at all on the website that I applied to, that it was for an HBO show with the Foo Fighters called Sonic Highways. Have you seen that?
Yeah. I was going to ask about that because, I checked out the IMDb and I was like, damn, because the Foo Fighters are like one of my all-time favorite bands.
Yeah. So it all worked out. And I was like, sure, I'll take the job. And I was helping just as an assistant archival researcher because that show had it's all about music history. So they needed help finding photos and it was very archival heavy. But it was great because I met some fantastic people there that are still dear friends to this day. And it was great because I was able to kind of get my foot in the door and then felt stable enough where I could start making my own films because I knew I wanted my films to look really good. I didn't want to shoot an idea I had in my head with just my iPhone or something. I wanted it to feel like it had production value. So once I was able to kind of get myself set up and had a job, I was able to then start transitioning to make my own films. But yeah, so it worked out. I think it was just lucky, honestly. It happened that I was able to work on this really cool project with amazing people and with the Foo Fighters, which was rad. So
yeah, I mean, you can't. The whole documentary series. I watched it. It's amazing. But anything to do with Foo Fighters, I'm all about. I don't know. I could talk about that's a whole different show. But yeah. So you had mentioned you wanted your films to look good, and you kind of see that a lot. I think even with something like Evil Dead, like it's terrifying, but there are certain parts of that film where you watch it now and you can respect it for when it's made, but you watch it now and you're like, oh, that's obviously a mountain of clay that they're slowly doing claymation and slowly
right
but again, based on their budget and stuff like that, that's what they had to work with. One thing that I really wanted to talk to you about, because I watched Vanilla Cake. I watched I'm gonna be honest with you, I watched about a half of 4950, and then, like I said, I had a 2-year-old. She woke up from her nap, so I need to go back and finish that. But what I noticed is, one, they look awesome. I mean, the framing, you definitely have a unique style, which I think is very, very cool.
Oh, thank you.
The other thing, oh, you're very welcome. Yeah, I didn't do it. You did it. So thank you. I really enjoyed it. But the other thing was, you, especially in those 2 shorts, you do such a good job of creating tension with minimal characters. You know, like Vanilla Cake is 2 characters. Like 4950 is, you know, mostly, you know, paramedic and a girl in her bathroom. You know what I mean? Is that something that comes naturally to you, or did you write with that intention? Because I was just like Vanilla Cake, for example, you know, when it's his birthday, but you can see on his face, and I don't want to spoil it for we're gonna link up the short films, because I want people to go and watch them, so I don't want to spoil it for anybody. But I mean, it has 6.5 million views on YouTube, so I mean, I'm sure people have seen it. But is there a trick for you to capturing that tension, I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, I don't think I knowingly or consciously wrote it, any of the films that I've done, with just a few characters. But I think what I really enjoy writing is interpersonal relationships, and how like those can be complicated, and how maybe one person is feeling one way, meanwhile the other person is feeling a completely different way. And I think just because I enjoy that kind of tension, it lends itself to just being 2 or 3 characters, really. But I think that's where the most interesting stories are, is I don't necessarily feel like you need a lot of action or a lot of dialogue or a lot happening in a film or in a scene for it to be interesting. I think like if you're able to get the writing right, or you're able to get the story right, then just 2 well-developed characters can play off of each other and create a very like high intense, I mean, I won't spoil Vanilla Cake, but what ends up happening is, just because these 2 characters see a situation very differently, a lot, like an explosion can happen. And that's to me what is so fascinating about well-developed characters, is so much can be happening when 2 people feel like they are what they believe to be right. And that's not always like what I'm feeling and what you're feeling are completely justified, but when those clash, you know, a lot can happen. And that's what I love.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that about Vanilla Cake, because when I was watching it, the sense that I got was, and I think it's something that everybody can relate to, but there was a sense of the frustration when you feel like you're not heard.
Right.
Know?
Exactly.
And I think I was like, oh man, like, would I go to the extremes that some of these characters have gone to when I feel unheard? No, but I think I think everybody can relate to that. I think everybody can relate to, like, I'm in this relationship, or I have a friend or my parent where it doesn't matter what I say, it's heard a different way, or, you know, we're never on the same page about things. And like, it was, I don't know, it was really interesting. And there's the one shot, I think the one shot that really got me, and it's a simple shot, but it's just of that pull light just swinging for that couple extra seconds, because I felt, but yeah, that just that shot for it was just, and again, not to spoil it, but it's just like you get such a rush, and then it's like, cool down before we take you. I really enjoyed that. I thought it was a really creative way, and maybe it's in there for a completely different reason, but for me, it was used as almost like a little bit of a palate cleanser before you got to dessert, if that's
right. I mean, exactly. Yeah. And partly too, after that light swings, we immediately cut to the sound of I won't give it away, but the sound of something being scraped very, very loudly. And so, I think it is a little bit of a palate cleanser, but it's also like that jarring thing of like, we now got to take care of this situation. Like, what And to me, that's almost like, hey, he's starting to settle into what has just happened and what, it's like go time now. Like we got to take care of this mess that we just made, you know?
Yeah. The actions have consequences. Like I made
Right.
a choice and now, and again, I'm hoping that people are listening and they're like, okay, I don't know what they're talking about, but like, I'm going to go watch it.
Yeah.
So, you know, I know that you had mentioned that you were a big fan of The Twilight Zone, and I am a big fan of the original Creep show. And then I've also been watching, I don't know if you've seen it, but Greg Nicotero has the Creep Show miniseries that came out fairly recently. So it's like,
oh no, I haven't.
Yeah, it's on Shudder, or it's I have like the AMC Plus that has like all the Shudder content, so that's where I watch it at. But it's very true to like the original. And the reason I bring those up is because I want to talk about your podcast, because your podcast is awesome. So it's Skeletons in My Closet. And when I listened to the first episode, that was exactly what it reminded me of. It reminded me of like an old, like horror radio serial in a way, where you like the story starts but you have to, I think kind of what you were talking about earlier, like challenging yourself to stay in it to the end for the payoff, at least with the first episode. Because by the time we got to the end, I was like, what the hell? Like, but like in a good way. So I wanted to ask, so first of all, are you writing these stories? Are these Crystal Pastis stories, or are you like working with other people?
No, I wrote all of them.
Okay.
They're all my writing. Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, you were an amazing narrator, because when you get that soft voice and then it's like,
Thank you.
I found myself, I was like, again, I don't know if it's intentional, but like, I feel like when you speak softly like that, then people's ears perk up and they're like, well, let me pay attention to what she's saying. And
that means a lot. I've never done anything like that before. So I was, you know, maybe you've experienced this, but like when you listen back to your own voice and you know, I'm trying to play characters in each of these episodes. So there was a lot of moments of self-doubt. I'm like, is that too performative? Is that too like, is this coming across right? And so that means a lot. I appreciate that.
Oh no, you're very welcome. And you're right. I mean, it's when I first started doing the show, I was picking myself apart terribly. And then I was like, you know, but this isn't about me. This is about the people that I have on. So I'd probably sound just as bad now as I did in episode 1. I just have better guests. So
well, and I will say too, like no one will really know the mistakes that you make. You know, like there are some things that I put that in some of the episodes that I'm like, oh, I hit that word kind of weird, or, oh, was that too much space? But then I realized like, you know, these stories are new to the people that are listening, and they're not going to know that, you know, I can like just, you know, pick myself apart so much and like try and get it so perfect. But I'm like, sometimes there are these like, sometimes the flaws work in the story, you know, sometimes that like the voice that I was trying to have gets a little shrill, and I'm like, well, it's a little spookier that way, you know, like sometimes these mistakes like add to it. So
yeah. And I mean, also like you said, you're playing characters, you know, you're essentially doing voice narration and character work. So it's like, who's to say that in that moment, based on whatever that this character would be feeling, why wouldn't their voice get a little shrill? You know what I mean? So you have a little more room to play around. It's because I know that you said it was brought about because of quarantine and things like that. But for people who are listening who haven't heard any of it, kind of like in a nutshell, kind of talk about what the podcast is, because I think it's really, really fascinating. And again, I don't think there's a lot of people out there. Yeah, there's always like the few like fringe idea or like fringe things that come to mind, but there really isn't a lot of people out there doing what you're doing. So kind of break down just exactly what it is that Skeletons in My Closet is. So
it's a narrative podcast, and every episode is a different horror story. They're all original stories. but the idea is that these stories, it's kind of to take you back to that time of like the old timey horror radio shows, or like a campfire story. But the idea is that these stories are too scary, and they're the ones that just were too terrifying to make it to the campfire. They're too alternative. They're too, scary. And the idea is that by the title, Skeletons in My Closet, it's like, these are the stories that were never meant to get out. They're people's secrets. These like stories that are people's like worst nightmares, that they've done something, or it's these terrible secrets that somehow have now gotten out. And that's the story. And every episode is different. It's not the same. I do all the voices for every episode, but it's not the same character in every episode. They're completely different stories. You're in a completely different location every episode, but each one is something terrible is happening, or someone's secret has now, by the end of it, you now know this person's worst nightmare or their biggest secret.
Yeah, I mean, that's the perfect way to, because that's exactly what it is. And especially for someone of my age group, it reminded me of a more adult, almost Are You Afraid of the Dark? I don't know if you watched that when you were a kid, but it was just, it's like, so I'll say this. When I listened to the first episode, I was going to pick up food. I was doing curbside delivery. My wife wanted food, didn't feel like cooking. So I got in the car and I was like, I'm going to listen to this. I'm sitting in the parking lot listening to it. And the lady comes out to bring my food and she knocks on the window. And like, I literally put my finger up and gave her like just a minute. And I was like, that's
the biggest review. That's the best thing someone could say.
Yeah. And she's like, hey buddy, like I've got like 3 other cars. And I'm like, hold on 1 second. And then I pause it, because I didn't want to lose where I was at. Because, when you're listening to something, it's, if you're watching something on Netflix, you can always go back. But if you're just listening, that's the only sense that you have. Like if you skip a second of it, it can kind of pull you out. So I wanted to make sure I was like, this is where it's going to end. And then this is where it's going to pick up. And the spot where I ended, I was like, okay, this is going to get good. So like, let me make sure I know exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is this something that you're doing as far as like the product? Because, I started my show and I'd never done any kind of podcast, anything like that. It was just, hey, this is an idea. I haven't want to do it. It's primarily me. And then I have an amazing post-production audio editor in Michigan, Mat Halliday, who I send everything to, and he makes it sound really good and then sends it back. But that's it. Like, not to like put a pun in there, but we're like a 2-man skeleton crew. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So is this something like, are you doing this? Is this 100% like solo you, or do you have anybody that you're partnering with that's like helping you with everything? Or
it's primarily me. My boyfriend does some music and mixing on it, and that's pretty much it. He's very good at music, and I also need somebody else's ear to like just do a once over pass and get some mixing. But other than that, it's that's really it. I have some experience in editing, so I recorded it all myself, and then I edited it together myself and did all the sound design, and then he'll just do a pass and add some original music to it. Some spots that I feel like, okay, this could use some more attention. Can you put like an interesting beat here? And he also did the theme song at the beginning and the end for me. But other than that, it was just it's been a skeleton crew over here too.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I mean, it's cool that Matt, the gentleman that I work with, I've known him since I was like 19. So I've known him for a really long time. So it's when you have somebody that like you have that. I mean, obviously, your boyfriend is somebody that you have like a close relationship with, someone that you can trust to. I think it makes it that much more fulfilling to put it out when it's a labor of love like that, and the people who are working on it care about it in that same way.
Right.
I did want to ask you this too. So, you're used to doing short films and working with crews and, like editors and I mean, even on Vanilla Cake, like there's a list of credits of people who worked on it. What is the feeling like? Is it almost more intimidating to put something out like Skeletons in My Closet when you're like, okay, this is me. Like there's no cameraman, there's no,
yeah,
cinematographer.
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, this definitely feels very personal. Like these are, this was, like I said, all born out of quarantine. And so, to me, it feels much more, my short films feel, like I stand behind those 110% because I get, like, the cinematographer I work with is incredible and the producer I work with is incredible. And I feel very confident when I put out these films because I'm like, I have a really great team of people that help me. For me, this was like, it's almost like diary entries in a way, like I wrote all of these because I was feeling very, truthfully, like very scared during the beginning of quarantine because I was thinking to myself, like, well, when am I ever going to get the opportunity to make my next short film? Like, I don't know the next time I'll be able to get a group of people in a tightly packed space where we're shooting these like really intense scenes. And I just had some short films I had kind of put in the back burner that I wanted to shoot one day, but I had other projects I wanted to do first. And then just ideas started coming to me while I was in quarantine. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to just write all of these down and I'm going to put them out there. And then maybe somebody will enjoy these like spooky stories because there's something to me so comforting about those like old timey spooky radio shows or like the Twilight Zone. And maybe somebody will get a weird sense of comfort by listening to these like I had making them. And so yeah, it does feel very personal. Like I had gone and visited my parents on the East Coast for a little while and I recorded all of them in my mom's closet, like in just this tiny little space. So like every part of the way it really does feel like I am sharing a diary with the world a little bit.
That's awesome. And it's funny that you say that because like, kind of bringing back that nostalgia or having like that. When I was listening to it, what I envisioned in my head was like, I'm the oldest of 4. So I could see if we had something like that, like on cassette, it would be like me and my brother and my sister. And we're all like on the floor on a Saturday night, like just listening to it. And so I'm hoping that like, yeah, we live in a digital age, but it's, like I can see a bunch of people sitting by a fire and like having it going through like a Bluetooth speaker and everybody having like their blankets on and you know what I mean? Yeah. It's just, I don't know. It's cool. It's cool. And I feel like it harkens back to something that like, I don't know. It's a callback to like without the original form of that, we wouldn't have what we have today. So like you're taking some of those first building blocks and completely reinventing them for 20 crazy years. So it's, I don't know. It's I'm really excited because I think you have what is it 3 or 4 full episodes out now?
Yes, there are 3 out now, and then one is being released on Halloween. It's called a Halloween Spooktacular because it's going to be very big and very showy, and it's probably one of my very favorite episodes out of the whole bunch that I wrote. It's all about Halloween and it's very fun, but it's also very dark. It's probably one of the darkest and most horrific ones out of the whole bunch. And then I'll release a couple more after that one. And then that will be season 1. And I've had such a wonderful time making them that I think I'll continue on with season 2. And then we'll see where it goes from there.
And that was actually going to be my next question because I could very much see it being like, 6-7 episodes and then take a break and then write where I don't know. It's just like, I think it's just funny to me because, this is obviously like albeit virtual, it's my first time meeting you and you are such like a polite and nice person. And like you see, you know what I mean? But then to listen to these stories and be like, she's like, yeah, I just, this is my diary. I'm like, what kind of, what kind of diary are you keeping? But it's,
I know,
but I think it's I think everybody has thoughts, like in the darker places of their brain. It's just cool that like someone like you can unlock those and then turn them into something that other people can be entertained by. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah. I guess like, each story on the surface level, they're very dark and like, terrible things are happening within them. But, I hope, and this is what I love about horror in general, is that there's always like a deeper story underneath, if you take the first episode, for example, I won't give anything away, but there's something really, really crazy happening during that first episode. But if you start like to break it down, there's these underlining themes of that I feel like I certainly experience, and I'm sure other people do, which is like, these ideas of like self-doubt and questioning yourself and feeling like you're right and the rest of the world is wrong. And then, another episode, the second episode is, there's that general story as to what's happening, but underneath that it's feeling scared and not safe, and like the place that you feel like your home is the place that should be untouched is suddenly violated. And so, that's part of the reason why I do feel like it's these diary entries, and the part of horror that I just love so much. It's like, yeah, there's these things happening on the surface, but what's happening underneath all of that? What's that like emotion? What's those feelings that the story is really telling?
Yeah. And I think that's where the challenge is, how can I tackle these issues and make a statement while still being entertaining, and especially when you're in the horror genre, like how can I tackle these issues, but how can I leave you feeling creeped out or
exactly.
I don't know, like I said, that first episode, and I won't spoil it for anything, but by the time it got to the end, and I guess what I'll say is there's a background sound that happens throughout the episode. And at a point, that background sound changes. And I think,
That's right.
I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, yeah.
It has to be very, it had to be very planned and methodical. But yes. I was like, oh shit. Like, okay, that completely makes sense. So I'm really looking forward to diving into the rest of the episode. I think it's going to be one of my top 3 podcasts out there that I'm not gonna be. And the cool thing is, for people who are listening, this show, we've been going now, about an hour, and there's so many podcasts out there, like, Joe Rogan and all the stuff that's like, 2, 3, 4 hours long. I think one of the things that I really enjoyed about yours is like, it's I think the max is like a 25-minute episode. And so it's just like, it's I think of it almost as like when I finally have some time away from the child, because they're at that age right now where they're like soaking everything up. So I'm trying to be careful.
Yeah, probably.
Like, you want to come watch The Strangers? But I'm trying to. It's scary because it's completely random. Pay attention.
I know. Do you see that mask? Pay attention.
Right, but it's one of those things that when I have, when I get an hour, like I'm going to put headphones and I'm going to binge like the whole thing. Because, it's, and that's, especially nowadays, like, people go through Netflix and they're like, I'm going to watch 6 seasons of the show in 3 days. Like, if you're checking the show out, like, listen to 2-3 episodes, like fully let yourself get fully immersed in it, because it's, like I said, man, there's not really a lot of stuff out there. There's shows like Lore, but Lore, I don't know. This is different. This is like very much like old timey, around the campfire, like man with the hook for the hand, but for like our generation, and it's pretty fucking awesome. Like I dig it.
Thank you. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you this too. So obviously it's on Apple Podcasts, but is there a place where like you prefer people to check it out? Like, is there a website, or are you like me where it's kind of like wherever you can find it, just listen to it?
Yeah, you can find it on Apple Podcasts, of course, Spotify, Stitcher. And then I'm also putting all the episodes up on YouTube. So that's where Vanilla Cake is. And you can also see my other short films there. But I've also, to accompany every episode, I've also been putting up videos, and it's almost like a lyric video for like a lyrical music video kind of thing. But it's, you can listen to them there, and then you can see all of the words, and there's something spooky happening in the background too. But you can find them on YouTube as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, I like the read along idea too. It's almost like, do you watch films with subtitles?
I do. It's so funny that you say that, because the other day I was I've been watching that show Ratchet. Have you seen that yet?
I haven't, but I heard it was really. I want to go back and I haven't seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in like over 10 years, so I want to go back and rewatch that, and then go to
and then watch that. Yeah. Well, that's the smart thing to do. But I've been watching. I watched Ratchet with the subtitles on, and it gave some of it away. So I was like, okay, when I feel like there's a tense moment coming up, I've kind of been like, shielding my eyes. But I do like watching it with the subtitles, because I feel like you get some more out of it than you normally wouldn't. I feel like sometimes you can just like let words pass over you, but if you see them written down, you can definitely get that like extra punch.
Yeah, I watched the one that I'll always remember is I watched The Hills Have Eyes, the most recent remake of the original, great. And I watched that with subtitles on. And there's so much stuff that like those like the mutant folk are saying that like you don't pick up on that you see in the subs. Yeah, creep me out. But
that's great.
But I like the idea, because it's almost like if someone's watching it on YouTube and they're reading along with it, like it's kind of double absorbing, like you're hearing it and then you're I don't know. I think it's as far as like your sensory experience, I feel like it would add a little to it to be able to like kind of bouncing ball read along with it,
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this too, because I know, we're coming up here about an hour and 10, and I wanted to ask, kind of before we wrapped everything up, but I know you said, and I know right now, California, we're in Nashville. So Nashville, imagine California, imagine Nashville being the complete opposite, where they're like, we're open, y'all come on, like come get a bar, go to the comedy shows, whatever. Is there anything you have planned like down the line? Anything? I mean, obviously we're going to link up the podcast, we're going to link up the shorts, but is there anything that people should be looking out for you down the line? Any projects you're working on, or is that kind of all still being juggled in the air a little bit?
A little bit. I do have a short film that I've written that I'm hoping to get made pretty soon. It's going to be, I'm very excited about it. I think the story is awesome. And now that things are opening up a little bit more here, there are film productions starting up again and things like that I'm focusing like all my attention on that. And I have a feature that I have written that would be also like the next big thing. So those two things are definitely in the works. And then as well as like a season 2 of the podcast. That's awesome. And I would dig a feature. I mean, again, I'm telling you, if check out the podcast, yes. Also, please watch Vanilla Cake. It's like less than 8 minutes long, but it is a jarring like 7 minutes and 45 seconds. It's really, really good. Thank you. I just want to say thank you. Again, being a horror fan, it's really, really cool to not only enjoy somebody's work, but to be able to sit down and talk with somebody and to I just want to say thank you for having a unique voice. There's so much of the same, you see remakes or, even if it's not a remake, it follows the same template of another thing that's been out there and stuff. And so I feel like it's very rare, especially now, that there are unique voices and unique stories and unique ideas. And that is definitely what I got from kind of diving into your work. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And would you stick around for a minute after we wrapped up? Oh, of course. Yeah. Awesome. Well, guys, that's episode 38. Thank you so much for listening. A big thank you to Miss Crystal Pastis for being here. Check out Vanilla Cake. Check out Skeletons in my Closet. I almost said Skeletons in my podcast. Skeletons in my Closet. That's podcast. A great spinoff. Well, links are down below or in the show description. We will see you guys next week for episode 39. Thank you for being here. Thank you. so much.